Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Before I get into today's show and talk to you all about today's guest, a returning guest, there's been a bit of an update in my sphere. So, obviously, I recently celebrated 5 years of the podcast. You can find that episode on my Patreon. I've also opted to make a change to the show. So, from this episode moving forward, you will now see episodes around 45 minutes to 50 minutes, something like that. That's going to be what we're going to be aiming for. And anything past that will be bonus content for the Patreon, exclusive to Patreon viewers. So it'll be patreon.com/Christian Reeve. It comes from people like yourselves, people commenting. I've had this suggestion a few times over the years. I've tried a lot of different things with the show, everything from clips to should it be 45 minutes? Should it be an hour and a half? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know what? Let's give this a go. And it gives more reason to join the Patreon. It also gives, I don't know, some breathing room as far as the actual show is concerned. And we're going to give it a go. I'm going to give it a go. So this will be your first episode in that new era. So once again, patreon.com/Christian Reeve if you want to get access to bonus content from the from the podcast, my apologies, as well as bonus episodes of the podcast and all the behind the scenes stuff with me, including gigs and exclusive series that you could only get on Patreon. Right, now I'm done with the plug, so we can get on with the show, yeah? Today's guest is Dr. Randy Overbeck. He's been on the show before I think within the last year, possibly. I might be wrong.
More than a year, I think. Yes.
It was, yeah. And you may remember he's an author. He is a retired teacher. He had quite the career, lots of different things, and some of those things I will be quizzing him on today. But he's going to talk to us about his new book and just how he's been. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's we just came off of a weekend of an exciting launch of my new book. Except for being a little tired from lots of activity, I'm doing fantastic.
How does it work with like a book press run? Because obviously you see like actors all the time when they're doing their things with films, and it looks quite exhausting just in general promoting something. I've done a little bit through things like music and stuff, but what's it actually like promoting a book? Like what does it entail?
Well, in my case, I work with a small press who really provides a little bit of advice, maybe, but not much actual physical on the ground help. So everything is kind of up to me. So I worked with the press to target the date that we were looking for to try to launch at this particular week and what we did was we launched the book in the town in which it takes place, which was kind of exciting. So we were in this small resort town of Saugatuck, Michigan. And we were there during one of their biggest weekends of the year, what they call the Phoenician Festival.
Hmm.
Saw lots and lots of really great people, had a wonderful conversation about everything from books to education. But I had four gigs, as you would say it, four engagements in 5 days. So I'm a little on the
Oh, that is tiring. Was it mostly just public speaking events, or was it just kind of meet and greets, that kind of thing? Like
It
what?
was it was a little variety. So
Hmm.
I did what I have a book talk. I have a talk that I have shared. I think I mentioned this that I've shared
Mhm.
over 150 times all over this country called Things That Go Bump in the Night. And I do that as kind of an intro to my books. I did one of those. I did two book signings, and I was an all-day guest at what they call the art fair, which it was just there's one other author and me, and all the rest are either artisans or actual. The guy next to me was a remarkable um, painter, modern art painter. He was really incredible. Uh, but that was in the hot sun between 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And man, I'm telling you, I was wrung out by the end of that day.
What were some of the more memorable interactions you had with readers of your book, and or just people just wanting in general to maybe get into your book series?
Well, since we were actually launching this new book called Red Shadows at Saugatuck in Saugatuck, um, the vast majority of people walking around are visitors. So Saugatuck is a town that's really tiny. We're talking less than 1,000 people on a non day on day when they don't have visitors. But town's population, I think that day swelled to like 10,000 maybe, or 8,000, something in that range. So there are lots and lots of people who come just because they love this town. So much of the talk was me regaling them with episodes or ideas or sections from the book that they will take home and love because they had been on the dune ride. They had been climbed Bald Mountain. They had done many of the things that are embedded in the story of the book. They were, and then there were lots of native Saugatuckians, as they call themselves, and they were intrigued to see how well I did it representing their small town that they're very proud of. So it was a really, I mean, it was exhausting. It was hot and it was tiring, but it was a delightful time. People were absolutely fantastic. We sold lots and lots of books, but I also had lots of great conversations with people just coming by asking me about, oh, you're an author. How does that work? And how long, I would get all kinds of questions, Christian, from um, how long did it take you to write this book?
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the common questions too. Well, you don't live here? Like, how did you know what to write about if you're not from Saugatuck in this case? So it was a very interesting day, just an awful lot of activity packed into 5 days.
I mean, it's a fair question though. That what is why Saugatuck? What's your connection to this town?
I don't have any, but I'll tell you my process because that's kind of what I explained to them. So this is, as some of your readers or some of your listeners will know, viewers, this is the fourth entry in a very successful series. The first two in the series are already bestsellers, and in each case, I've used the same basic kind of approach. So what happened with the first book was we had actually vacation on this single location, place called the Eastern Shore of the Chesapeake Bay, about half a dozen times, just plain for fun, just for vacation. And as I was there, I thought, I think I could make a really good murder mystery here if I did this. And it went so well. The book did so well. I said, well, I'll see. So what I've then done in each of the next cases, I've either stumbled upon, in the case of Cape May, the second book, or I actually researched the others to find the right place. So this fourth book, since we're here to talk about my new book called Red Shadows At Saugatuck, takes place on the lower peninsula of Michigan. For those people in the U.S., Michigan has like two parts, a little bottom part and a top part. And Daryl, my protagonist, is actually from there. His family is from there. He got dumped at the altar in the first book, so he'd go someplace else, but he's coming back for a family activity. So I had decided I wanted to find a neat resort town. He's not from a resort town. He's from a place called Ann Arbor, Michigan. I wanted to find a neat resort town that I could highlight in the book. So my wife and I, 4 years ago, went up and researched four different towns, trying to see, would this work? Can this work here? And we just fell in love with Saugatuck. We had never been to Saugatuck in our life, ever. But I thought, now this has lots of neat things that I could weave into the story of the book, and I already knew that I was going to have a new secret weapon, or if you want to call it, in this book. So it all worked well together. And the other layer that's really important is, in order to make the book authentic and to make people who live in the area or visit there that it rings true to them, I depend a lot on the local people. So I almost always have at least one or two local contacts that kind of steer me where I need to go. You go check out this, go talk to this person, go do that. And in this case, it was a wonderful gal who runs their visitors bureau. It's called the Saugatuck Douglas Visitors Bureau. Her name is Lisa Mize. And she kind of took my hand and guided me, told me where to go. And then the other thing that I do is, and I feature restaurants. I feature amusements that are in the town. And so what I do, first I get permission from those people to do that when I'm in there. That's part of my goal. And then I actually send them the pages of the book that features their restaurant, the pages,
That's a cool idea.
and then I have them make sure they go over it, make sure it's accurate, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's there. So I did some when I went back this time, I saw some of those people and thanked them and told them how grateful I was and stuff like that. So that's all part of kind of how it gets to the final piece of being able to share with people.
And I think it demonstrates your dedication to getting it right. And because some people might not consider going to those lengths. Like if I take the podcast as an example in my life, I've never not had notes prepared and kind of done my research and thought about, well, what is this show going to be? Even if it doesn't end up being that, I think it's just good
Yeah,
to
you're
be
right.
prepared. You know what I mean? And it says a lot about you, obviously, with the fact that you've got this book. It's based on their town, and as you said, you've not got like a connection to the town. You've just picked it, and you've done your research, and you've kind of gone from there. It's kind of there is pressure involved, but because you've done that sort of groundwork, there's nothing really to worry about, and it's just kind of, I don't know. I guess it makes it more relatable. There's more of a personal connection, obviously, for the residents of that town. And I guess, like, to be honest, it's kind of a stroke of genius from a marketing perspective because it's forever tied with that now. So now,
Right.
like, if the book becomes a bestseller too, it's like it's going to be like, well, now it's part of advertising, and now your name is connected with that town. That must be a pretty cool feeling.
It is. It's real, and part of what my goal is to kind of, I discovered this wonderful place. I'd like other people to discover this wonderful place.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, that's all part. And I will tell you that I have a network of a lot of authors that are published by this same publisher and some other ones, and most of those authors don't do what I do. If they wanted to write something, they create a fictional town
Mm.
in the general area and try to capture this nth of this part of the Northeast or this southern, but they don't use an actual town. And I will tell you that I had to have some arguments with the publisher in order to get this done because they were concerned about misrepresentation or uh, creating a story that somehow reflected negatively on the town. So one of the things I'm very careful about is, I'm talking about each of my books have a very serious, ugly murder, and I don't want that murder attached to the town. So I find some way of making it so that Daryl, my protagonist, is is in the town, is doing the stuff in the town, but somehow the murder drags him someplace else that's not the town itself. That's very important to me.
I feel like it's kind of a null point because if people are into something and it draws attention, whether it be a book, a film, a TV series, people will go out of their way to check that out. Like, for instance, I'm a huge fan of Dexter, the TV show, right? And recently they've been doing different continuations, like a prequel series, a sequel series, etc., etc. Now, all of it is based in Miami. There it is. And I mean, I think they do a good job of kind of showing you the best side of Miami, but it's a fair point. There's a lot of murders. It does kind of make it seem like a horrible place to live by that, you know.
Right.
But then, like anywhere in the world has its good side, its bad side. That's some more than others. I understand that, but it does drive kind of tourism. Like I would hazard a guess. Actually, I'll put money on it that because of shows like Dexter, there is more tourism to already well populated places like, well visited places like Miami. But there's other examples of places where New Mexico is a good example for the Breaking Bad TV show. They get a lot of tourism of people just visiting the spots. And a lot of the time, it is just like the houses they used in the show, or like one of them is like the spot of a chicken restaurant that was used as a front for Mexican drug cartel. Like it's people like that connection. Yes, it exists in story, but I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. Now, fair enough, if there's misrepresentation or what you're doing outwardly goes out of its way to disparage a place, I can understand that. But I mean, it's more just like this story is set in this place, which is kind of cool, isn't it? Like how many? I mean, I don't know the history of Saugatuck as a town, but like how much have they been wrote about? I'm sure it's pretty cool to have that, to have an
I
author.
was I'm the first national writer. They talked to me, and actually I met one of the local writers who has written little tiny cozies. He calls them beach reads that about murders in Saugatuck some 100 years earlier. And there was another gal that is writing about, but I'm one of the first national writers that's been writing about Saugatuck. So, which was kind of fun. But and I will tell you that I get comments in my emails all the time about people saying, "Well, now that I read your book, I'm putting this on my visit list, on my go-to list." So I know that that's and that's part of my intention is either not necessarily that's to send people there, but to let people experience the fun and the enjoyment of a place like that, even if they're not even able to go, even if they're invalid and they can't get there. Well, at least this way they can enjoy what life would be like on the streets and stuff. So that
Absolutely,
is
yeah.
part of my intent. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's if nothing else, it's a form of advertising, isn't it? And that's fun. The whole time that you were talking, it kind of just reminds me of Stephen King's love for Maine,
Yep.
and because obviously he's from there, he's based a lot of his characters and stories in Maine. And some it's interesting, like sometimes he'll base it on a real place in Maine, other times he's kind of like made up one. Like I remember there was in The Stand, I think he made up a few spots in Maine that didn't exist. And I think it speaks to his love and affinity for where he's from, and you see a lot of that in the TV and film adaptations of his works. And I think that's always pretty cool, isn't it? To kind of celebrate these places and show the author's love for these places, and it's a connection. It's always, you could be there in Saugatuck reading your book and
In
feeling it
fact, I
and
had
immersing
several
yourself.
people say they were there for the week and they're going, "This is my read for the week. I'm going to be checking out these places." So that was kind of fun. What makes it a challenge for me more than other writers, and this is certainly no offense to Stephen King, but I purposely choose very different places, which means I have to learn all over again because Saugatuck, for example, is not very much at all like on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Both they have very different vibes, uh, so in each case, it requires a whole new set of research. In my case, which love to do, to make sure that I can get the feel of the town right, as well as the murder mystery and all the rest of those pieces.
Absolutely. How would you say you've grown as a writer since your last publication?
I'm always trying to stretch myself as a writer. I'm always looking for ways to um, either improve my craft or improve my storytelling. And I will be honest with you, up to now, this new book is the best work I've done. Um, there are a couple of things that I did differently in this book. One is in the earlier books, we only have one POV. The story is told from Daryl, our hero. In this book, we branched out, and a third of the story maybe is told from his wife, now wife, Erin. So I had that particular POV. But the most challenging part and fun for me was in this story. So in the first book, Blood on the Chesapeake, the two meet. In the second book, they fall in love. In the third book, they're on their honeymoon. This book actually takes place 7 years later, 2007, and they now have a 5-year-old son. So writing about the family dynamics and the 5-year-old son has inherited his father's ability to see ghosts. So that created a challenge, but a very interesting way to add layers to the story that I've not done before.
It's tricky as well with time hops, I feel, because it's like, do you choose to ever explore that? Do you let people use their imaginations? You speak to a little bit to time hops and how you kind of decide on that it's right to tell this story as opposed to those intervening years.
Well, so how this all got started was in the very first book, um, Daryl is investigating death in the town, which turns out to be a lynching. Okay, this is on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, and part of my research turned up that they actually had lynchings on the Chesapeake Bay. The last recorded ones were in the 40s, but in the United States, the last recorded lynchings were in the 60s,
Hmm.
62, 63, maybe 64, anywhere in the US. So I realized that I had to make that had to be the year or the year around where the lynching was. And then to create the story, I wanted to make it so that those who were involved in the lynching were now the power players in town. Okay. So they were teenagers when the lynching occurred. So how old would they be? That actually puts the story in the middle to late 90s. So Daryl's journey begins in 98 in on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Everything else simply proceeded from there. So the second book takes place the next summer, that's 99. The third book takes place 6 months later in 2000 when they get married. And then to do this one, what I figured out was, okay, well, I had decided I wanted to have a little boy. I said, this will really make things, it'll give readers a new perspective. Um, and I thought, oh, married a couple of years and they have a kid. Okay, so that's why I said it in 2007. And each of those years, Christian, is involves a different kind of research because in each case, for each one of those locations, I had to figure out, well, what restaurants were operating in 2007? There are lots of restaurants in Saugatuck that are there now. They weren't there in 2007. And the same thing on the Eastern Shore and the same thing in Cape May, all of those places. So that's part of it. What was going on in 2007? What was the music like in 2007? What was in the news in 2007? All that's used to create a milieu in which the story occurs.
It's interesting as well, like how much the time frame of when something happened like serves a story. Like for example, shout out to my friend Lee Morrissey. I'm really hoping to get him on the show at some point. He's just published his first short works, and we were discussing. So I quickly read through it, and I gave him my thoughts. And the biggest thing that I said to him is, when I read this, it's not set in today's world. Like he wrote it as being in today's world, and I just in my head I couldn't imagine it. Like to me, it was like 80s, maybe 90s, and it felt right in that era. And I couldn't explain to him really why. It just kind of lent itself well to that.
Well,
I feel like sometimes maybe yeah, if you're writing a novel, in many ways, like I liken it to songwriting. It takes on a life of its own. Like it starts from you, and eventually you are serving the song, and you do what's right for the song. And I imagine with a book, it's kind of similar. It's like you're forging it. Things make sense a certain way. Obviously, with your research, that kind of helps to frame it this way, and where you're doing your story planning there. That then it's like okay, so if I if there's a time jump here, it will make sense for it to happen at this time in this place. And as you said, now you got to look at all the variables. Like, okay, what devices are they using? How are they communicating? And then that weirdly like feeds into the plot situation because you're like, if it was modern day, you just call someone or text them. But if
right.
it's set in the year or 1998, 99, you're trying to find a payphone, you're trying to find maybe a house phone, something like that. It's not, people did have cell phones, but
Some people did. Yeah.
yeah, not everyone. Like it's
Either the rich
interesting.
had cell phones or drug pushers had cell phones in the
Right.
90s.
Yeah.
That
I'm
was the
actually
thing.
I'm having a lot of fun with that actually because some of the Dexter series that I mentioned is set in like the early 90s, so they kind of have to work around that. And like if I remember when I went back and I watched Breaking Bad, which was actually set in the 2000s, like there was it was recorded then as well. They've all got flip phones, and I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But then that's true. That's how it was then. But the difference is obviously they're not. It wasn't like them basing it in a time period. Like they were actually filming it then. But
Right. That's It's easier for them. Right.
right, yeah, yeah. But if you're trying to base it in that time period and you're not in that time period, then it's like you've got to get your facts straight.
Part of what I do is I try to get the lingo, the what things did they say? There's very few any kind of cuss words in my books, but I try to get it so that that people, in fact, it's really funny. One of the reviewers said this. They said, when you pick up Dr. Overbeck, no, they said Overbeck's book, they said, you're kind of in for a time warp. It was a younger writer. It's going to take you a little while to realize he's not talking about now, even though it says when you start the book, it says 1998 or whatever the year is. It. So I found that kind of interesting, especially that's especially hard for young readers, I've noticed, to do that.
Yeah, I remember like reading the Harry Potter books for the first
Hmm.
time, and then obviously seeing the films when they came out, and because they kind of push it a few years forward. As I understand, it's supposed to just be set in the 90s.
Yeah, the first book came out in
Mm,
98. So
right. Yeah. 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 But like, I think it was supposed to be set a few years early, maybe like 92, 93, something like that. Um, and yeah, I mean, like when you watch it in the cinema, like the film adaptation, I don't know, I feel like it's confusing to be honest, because it does move with the times and it does obviously, I mean, you never see them with like phones or whatever, but they were kind of wearing clothes that were a mismatch between 90s clothes and like something out of a storybook that you probably read as a kid, and then also like I don't know 19th century clothing as well. It's a bit of a
you're right.
mismatch, and it's very confusing. But then in my head, I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's fantasy. But anytime they would actually be in like the real human world, they did have to factor that in, which I thought was quite interesting. But yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make with this is it does in very much affect the storyline of a thing. Like the best example I could think of from like a film would be Home Alone. Like it's the classic. Why didn't he just call the cops?
Yeah, right.
You know, you know what I mean? Like, and that works at any time. Like now, it'd be like you'd call them, they'd be there within 10 minutes. Boom, done. But even then, he had a house phone. I don't get it. But then that doesn't serve the plot.
911, right? When he came out, I don't think we had, well, you have 999 in England, but
Right, right, right,
911,
right.
yeah, I don't think that, but you're right. Yeah. Well, and I've noticed that there are several plot lines in stories where I'm going, well, why didn't he just, John Grisham, who's a wonderful writer, has a story in which a kid sees a murder, and the whole story is him being chased by the bad guys trying
Mm.
to stuff him out. And I'm going, why didn't he just go to the cops and tell him what he saw? Then then why would they kill him? Or go
That
to the
that infuriates me in like horror movies and books because I feel like, especially in those, people don't
no,
use logic,
no,
seemingly.
yeah, no. Right.
It's like, oh, the murder is that way. Let's go that way, or let's split up, or it's just what? No.
No. I don't know if you guys get these, but yeah, we have progressive commercials here in the US. Have you ever
Okay.
seen? Do you get those? Okay, all right. I didn't think so because it's probably anyway. So they're all the commercials are all stupid and silly, but they have a commercial that makes fun of horror movies, and they have a bunch of teenagers, and and they're going, "Oh, what? Somebody's coming. What should we do?" And the guy said, "Let's hide behind the chainsaws." You know, like making the worst possible decision they could possibly make.
I mean,
So I know.
I don't know. I can understand like being fearful in certain situations and making like anxiety
Um,
ridden decisions. Yeah, but like certain things are just okay. Like they have a car. Like this is a common one, right? They drive to the place in question, but they're I don't know caught up in the house and they're running away from the killer. Now they're back outside. That car is still there. Get in the car, drive away. You're
right
safe. There you
away.
go. Happy days. But no. Uh, yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that people always say that, don't they? They're like, "Oh, but Christian, without these things, you don't have a story." And I'm like, "Yeah, but the whole ability to suspend disbelief has to be based in some degree of realism. I'm willing to accept fantasy, error of judgment, stuff like that, but like, there's got to be because I think it feeds to your characters as well. Because if they don't think logically, then they're they're either stupid, and that's a comment on their intelligence, and that's fine if it's a character trait. If they're just dim or forgetful or something like that, fair enough. And if you establish that as a character trait, that's fine. But like, if it's just not been thought of, it's like I don't know. I feel like it can actually affect the story negatively in some instances. You know.
Especially in those stories where you have a group and all five of them are stupid or dumb or
Mm.
irrational. Didn't somebody think of the idea? One of the five. Okay, you know.
Like that's the frustration I find with horror movies is it's so predictable. You know, if you get a group of teenagers, you know that all of them will probably die, or maybe two of them. You can pretty much guess it. Either one person will survive, and it will be the person you either least suspect, or it will be the person who is worrisome, but they're intelligent, you know, and they survive sort of through resourcefulness, you know, being brave, courage, stuff like that. Or it's the classic, okay, you've got five people, six people, and there's two people that have some sort of romantic interest, but it's not clear, it's not established, but there's definitely chemistry there. And then the story slowly pushes them together, and then they sort of, they're together through this horrible situation, and then they end up living happily ever after surviving some of the most traumatic experiences of their life. um, and like, yeah, I know it's a plot device. It's fine. I'm picking it, but I don't know. I always like it when there's like adventure with it. I don't mind seeing storylines that have been done before. I mean, they work for a reason, but I think that like you want to have things that take you in different places and aren't always, you know, that formula. Like let's speak to the books that you've done so far. Like what would you say are sort of some of the more recurring themes, and what are maybe the lesser used themes that are used in your books?
Well, I think you know, part of the central theme in each of my books is a murder that has taken place that some either community or some people or some segment have covered over, ignored, dismissed, whatever the case may be. That's kind of consistent in each one for all very different reasons, you know. The second thing that's a theme in my stories is that as Daryl starts asking questions, and in the new book, what really makes it interesting is Daryl, and so often his son, his 5-year-old son, is asking the question of somebody before Daryl even have a chance to, and maybe Daryl didn't want to ask the question because he knows it may get him in trouble. As he's asking those questions, they are being seen it. First of all, this is the essential part. In each of the story, Daryl's an outsider. So
Ah,
Daryl's a fish out of water. So he comes to each place. So he relocates to eastern shore of Chesapeake Bay. So he's an outsider. Then he loses his job and goes to Cape May. He's just got there 3 days earlier. He's an outsider. The third story, he and Daryl on their honeymoon to a place that he had never been there before. They actually get a cottage from a doctor that she knows. That's how come why they're there. So he's an outsider there. And now when he's coming back, he's actually a Michigander, but he has never been to this part of Michigan, even though it's only 2 hours from where he grew up, I think. So that one of the recurrent themes is Daryl is discovering both the good and the bad parts of each place as a newcomer, as you and I would discover. That's part of the recurring theme. And then the other part that's a recurring theme in each of this, I don't know if that this is prevalent in some authors, but not all. And as he peels back the layers to get to the murder, get to the who did this, um, he always ends up getting connected, finding out the murder's connected to something far worse, far more horrible than the death of one woman, one guy, something like that. Those are the layer. Those are the tropes that I work with in my stories to make sure that everything kind of hangs together. The other piece that's different about my books, if you're a mystery lover, one of the rules, quote unquote, in a mystery is that you're supposed to have a dead body on the first page. or in the first chapter or in the first section or whatever, because that's the inciting incident. That's the incident that makes the story work. Well, in my case, there's almost never a dead body. So Daryl encounters a ghost who he ends up figuring out has been killed. But in each of the cases, they don't like when he finds out about Hank being lynched in the first book. Hank's body has been dead for 35 years. There's no dead body. In fact, one of the things that makes my books interesting is that when he encounters the ghost, most of the time, that's not true in the last book, he has no idea who the ghost is. So in each case, he encounters someone who's been murdered. He knows it's someone who's been murdered, and he has to start asking questions about, well, who could this possibly be? Which, of course, immediately gets him in trouble with the locals because they don't want him stirring up trouble. So
No,
I,
I get it. I think it's quite an interesting plot idea as well. That, but it's tricky, isn't it? Because as you said, like you need if it's about a murder mystery, then you need the murder to have happened so that there's the fear of who's the murderer? We're investigating this murderer. Da, 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 da. But I don't know. It's when you can kind of flip that on its head and try different things, like what you just laid out there. It kind of gives it an interesting dynamic, doesn't it? Something a little bit different, maybe something you're not used to, and then from there, that takes the reader in on a different journey, which is, you know, something, I
well,
think.
and I'm very cautious about not overstaying my welcome with any of the tropes. So I try to, and this one I shifted it up a little bit. So the background, the bigger part of the story is about MMIW, which I don't think you would be. Do you know what that is in London? It's a problem in the U.S. and in Canada. It stands for missing and murdered Indigenous women. The organization and the realization of this problem didn't really surface until 20 teens, something 2014, 2015. I don't remember what the first date is. And remember, this is taking place in 2007. So in 2007, no one is talking about missing Indian women. So in order to make this story work, what I do, the inciting incident is that Daryl and his family are stopping at a convenience store in Kalamazoo, which is on their way to where they're headed on the shore of Lake Michigan. And his son, who's 5 years old, only stands up as high as the counter is. Hanging on the counter, I'm assuming you guys have these in England, are these missing posters, you know, missing across the top of the page. So we have them everywhere here. Across top of it says the word in big print missing, and then has details on the they're almost always a child, a teen or a kid missing. Okay. The 5 year old is just beginning to learn how to read. And he starts to read part of this and then asks his dad to help him out. Well, it turns out that the poster he's reading ends up being the murder that they end up investigating. So that's kind of my inciting incident. And I had the 5 year old is the one that kind of pulls Daryl would have missed it because it's way below his eyesight. He wouldn't even have seen it. So
That's
that
clever.
was things I did different in this particular book.
It's also more horrifying that a child discovers that as well. I feel like there's always like an added element of like scariness when there's a child involved, and it's
And
kind of
part of the dynamics of the story is that Daryl is pretty sure from the beginning that, or at least he is sure as soon as he sees the ghost, but he's pretty sure from the beginning that this girl is dead,
mm,
not missing. But he doesn't want to chat. And his son says, "We need to find her. Can we help find this girl? She's been how long has she been missing, Dad? Is that how long is that? It says since blah blah blah." And he said, "Well, that's been about 3 or 4 weeks." He said, "Well, maybe we can find her." So the kid thinks he's going to help find this other girl. And then in the story, the 5 year old sees the other girl, not realizing that he's at that point, not realizing that he's seeing her ghost. So all that is part of the dynamics of the story of and Daryl trying to negotiate how much can he tell his son before they've been there. His son knows that he does see ghosts like his dad, so that part has all been established. But he how much of the evil can he share with his 5-year-old son and not traumatize him, but also to keep him safe, you know. So it was a challenging thing, but I really enjoyed doing it. Plus, it allowed me to do a lot about family dynamics and family love, and Daryl has his extended family in this story as well. His brother and his wife, his father and his mom, and his they're there for his great aunt's no for his aunt's 80th great aunt's 80th birthday. That's what bringing him back to the area.
What value do you think adding a story to the protagonist can actually add to the book and the stakes? Because obviously, if you have a situation like that and they are either investigating a murder or they're maybe being hunted by a murder or something like that, the stakes are really high, and obviously that is constantly weighing above their head. Now they've not only got to investigate, but they've also got to protect themselves and their family. So it's obviously like a big part of the overall plot. Like, can you speak to that, the value of actually bringing that in and making that a part of the story?
Yeah, and the other layer that I that is I tapped into the reality of the um, ignorance, the dismissiveness of the community of this problem, the deliberate ignorance, I'd probably say, because what when they begin asking this question, which increases the danger that they're putting themselves in, the reaction they get from everybody is, "Oh, those Indian girls run away all the time. Just if you wait a little while, they'll come back probably with a little baby. I probably got pregnant, you know." So part of what I'm trying to filter in is even as Daryl is hearing these um, explanations, he knows that they're rationalizations. He knows they're not. But he's always torn between, well, how much do I tell my son? When they ask a policeman and the policeman says, "Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal." The son thinks, well, I guess it's the cop said we shouldn't have to worry about it. So that's part of what Daryl has to negotiate. And he doesn't know, he knows someone in this circle is involved in her disappearance, but he doesn't know where the danger lies, which then makes him worry that much more. And in the story, he has to make a decision. He said, "We're leaving. We can't continue this. I can't put my son in this kind of risk, you know." So that it definitely amped up the tension in the story for him to constantly worry about what's going to happen to his 5-year-old son.
Let's move it forward. I'd like to talk about criticism for a minute, because I always find this quite interesting in any artist's life, because some people sort of choose to completely ignore it. Some people choose to sort of take it on board. Some people choose to tackle it head on. Where do you stand on criticism, and like how do you tackle it as an author?
You know, and I have heard those reactions you're talking about from everyone. I have author friends who say, "Oh, I never read any of my reviews." You know, that's not. I mean, that's not true for me. I'm not a review hound. I don't sit there and read all the reviews, but I do pay attention. I'm more than open to look at people's criticisms. First of all, I don't believe I have everything right. You know, I'm learning in this process just like I have for everything else in my life, and I probably won't have it right till I'm done. But so I'm more than willing. Oftentimes, the criticisms that I've run into are criticisms that are legitimate in this case, readers' point of view, but they're not really legitimate for the book. And I'll give you a few examples. So every once in a while, I run into a criticism, a review that's critical because the book wasn't scary enough.
Okay.
Well, they, you know, in our Western culture, when we think about ghosts, we are generally indoctrinated to think that there's some kind of horrible, scary thing involved except for cozies, which I'll get to that in a minute. So I've had people go, well, this wasn't really that scary. I thought the ghost would be the ghosts seemed tame, or I don't remember what words they used, but they were basically saying, well, these ghosts aren't like Stephen King's ghosts. Um, so that and I'm going, well, that's true, but that's not how the book was advertised in the first place.
Do you think that not maybe speaks to an issue of desensitization to some
Yeah,
extent?
that's right. Yes. In my talks that I give across the United States, I often talk about that, Stephen King has done such a thing. And I'm not picking on Stephen King. There's a whole group of writers that have used this as a trope
Mm.
or and that kind of stuff. And I've delivered well, and as I think I mentioned on the earlier one, the what I write about for ghosts, I try to keep the fictional appearance as close to what I have been able to document scientifically with people who do study this for a living. So there's plenty of scientific research about what ghosts do and don't do. And I have tried to keep the fictional representation of what my ghosts do as close to what we have, quote, evidence of ghosts doing.
What,
So, for example, my ghosts don't solve the crime. They don't whisper things into the ear of their to tell them, who the bad guy is. So that kind of stuff, which is in lots of books.
what
So,
ghost solving detectives?
yes. Oh yeah, lots of cozies. I call them Casper the Friendly Ghost stories. So
Oh, right.
um, I try to keep my ghosts as accurate as I've been able to find in the research of what ghosts do. There's,
To what? Why is that realism factor so important to you? Like, I mean, given that it's fiction, anything goes. Why does it matter?
I know it was a position I decided to take it with. I read a bunch of ghost books before I did mine.
Okay.
I read the Stephen King, Shirley John Jackson version, and I read several cozies where it's the ghost of my grandmother who used to own the bookstore and she solves the murder mystery. So I had read all those and I found something and then when I don't know if I shared in the earlier podcast how I kind of stumbled onto the ghost part of the story. Because when I first had envisioned writing this story, a ghost was not part of it. That kind of
Hmm.
was drafted on later. And it was as a result of my encounter with a paranormal investigation group that I was just so impressed with their work. And then I've done a lot of research since then. I went, well, why don't we represent this the way they're actually being able to find some kind of documentation of this occurring? And decided, well, that's a niche that isn't really filled very well. I was trying, everybody tries to find a niche that their books might stick out that be different than other books. So I guess that was my rationale behind doing it. It wasn't that you can't do. There's nothing wrong with the cozies making Casper the Friendly Ghost. People love that. Obviously, Stephen King is a wonderful writer, and he's created great stories doing that. I just wanted to take a different tact.
It's incredible. I always love delving into the psychology of things like this, and I think certainly what I've learned today, which I already kind of knew, but it's just fun, is like how much it does inform writing and an author's work and stuff. Because I think that certainly throughout your career, you've learned a lot from top to bottom about children, adults, and the way people's minds work. And it's just been really fun for me to delve into that again with you. And yeah, I guess I just want to say like a massive thank you for appearing on the show once more and for kind of letting us sort of peer into your mind as an author and obviously as an educator and everything. So I just want to say a massive thank you, Randy, for everything.
You're very welcome. It's a privilege to be here. I enjoy our conversations.
God
Well,
bless
I
you.
need to
Oh,
get this
yeah,
on here.
get it
So
in
at
shot. There you go. Red Shadows at Saugatuck by Randy Overbeck. There you go. There
least
it
just
is.
by 25,
Fantastic.
available everywhere now. So
Is it? Oh, actually, that's the question. So you can get it in paperback. Can you get it?
Well,
as
it's
a?
available as an ebook and paperback, and will be available audio. It
Oh,
takes about 4 or 5 months to go from printed to audio. So it'll be available probably around Christmas time, audio wise.
there you go.
All my
Exciting,
books are
man.
available. So
Massive congratulations. It's really awesome to see, and yeah, I want to I want to see you writing many, many more books. Hopefully,
I'm
thank
sure I'll
you.
be back. I actually have another book that's finished. That's with an agent. It's a completely different. It's a complete. Remember, I told you I challenged myself. It's a historical about the American Revolution,
Ooh,
uh, a period of thing called the Culper Ring, which is the spy ring that um, George Washington organized to help win the Revolutionary War. This spy ring was so secret that it had 6 men and 1 woman, and the final man identity was not revealed until 2020. It wasn't discovered until 2020. It was kept secret till then. They have never been able to identify, even though they know some things she did, they've never been able to identify the woman. So I've created a fictional character to step into that historical time and do
oh,
that. And it's called Abigail Trench, a Patriot spy, and I have great hopes for it. We're looking for that probably in the next year or two.
congrats, man. That sounds really exciting, and it kind of a departure from what you normally do, but like. I don't know. That's good because that's one thing I was wondering if you were going to kind of branch out from horror mysteries, and there it is, and that's a different avenue for the future. So yeah, I will make sure that there's links to Randy's books online. Obviously, a link to the first show we did together. Massive thank you, as always, Randy, and until the next time. And for all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, make sure you check out the other show that we did together. Check out Randy's books. Make sure to go and buy them if you can. You won't regret it. Also, make sure to go to patreon.com/Christian Reeve. £5 a month gets you bonus content from myself, from the podcast. You can get the bonus content that wasn't in this show. You can get the rest of our conversation over there, as well as many more bonus episodes, the recent 5-year anniversary episode of the podcast, as well as much more behind the scenes content, gigs, and everything else. Patreon.com/Christian Reeve. Thank you so much for watching and listening to the Christian Reeve podcast. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.